This one. Oh, you have? Okay, good. Last time we finished explaining on the first stanza, right? So now we read the second stanza. Of the suffering existing, I think you better use of all the suffering existing in the world, its root is none other than ignorance. The understanding to kill this root, you said, is none other than dependent arising. So this talks about how this verse, the first two lines talks about the way in which we enter into the samsara, right? And then the last two lines talks about the method and the means to get out of from that cycle of samsara or cycle existence. So here of the suffering, we can, when we, the suffering here refers to there are 8 kinds of suffering, 6 types of suffering and 3 types of suffering, right? And especially the suffering here mainly concerns with the suffering of the birth, the suffering of the sickness, old age and death. Mainly it refers to these kinds of suffering, and then we have another suffering which is what is called as the aggregates, the suffering of the aggregates, the suffering of having holding the aggregates, 5 aggregates, right? So the collection of the 5 aggregates. So these types of suffering, all this suffering arises because there is ignorance, Now the first, we need to understand when we talk about how we enter into the samsara, how we circle in samsara. We circle in samsara first. Of the 8 types of suffering, the most the important one to reflect upon is the first suffering, which is the suffering of the birth, right? And then the last suffering, the suffering of the collective 5 aggregates. So these two especially one need to reflect on, well, if we were to cease or make an end to this kind of suffering, because once the birth, once we make an end to the birth, and then the sickness is automatically ceased, and then the old age is also ceased, and also the death is also ceased. When I talk about cessation of all these things, I am referring to the karmic, the karmic, this kind of karmic sickness, old age, and death, because it is the birth which then give rise to all these three other things. Once the birth is taken, once we have the birth which is controlled, which is under the domination, or which is produced by karma and affliction, we are naturally subject to sickness, and we are subject to old age, we are subject to death, and then there are many other unfortunate and inauspicious things follows thereafter, like other kinds of suffering, all these what we call as degenerations, all the inauspicious things, all the unwelcome things, all the unwanted things happen because of the birth. Now in order to make an end to the birth, we need to understand where that birth arises, where what causes and conditions which produce the birth, this uncontrollable birth, right? So without this kind of birth that we have, that begins since beginningless lifetime, without any causes we should not have this kind of birth. Without any conditions we should not have this birth, because permanent causes cannot in no way give rise to the birth. Similarly, discordant causes or unsimilar type of causes in no way give rise to the birth that we do have. So finally we come to understand that the birth that we have is something that which is produced from its causes, the collective many causes and many factors and many causes is what makes our birth, is what begins our birth, right? So now this kind of birth is, we come to understand that it is produced by causes and conditions. If such a state of birth is produced by causes and conditions, now what is the causes? What is the cause? What are the causes? What makes our birth? So it is now naturally we come to understand that it is the karma. And especially when we talk about karma, we are referring to the second type of
karma, what is called as throwing karma or compelling karma or impelling karma of the 12 links of dependent origination. So here the first of the 12 links of dependent origination, the first being the ignorant, right? Ignorance. Then comes what is called as a volitional act, or impelling karma or propelling karma, because propelling karma, and then what happens is now here the karma, throwing karma or propelling karma again comes into existence because of what? Because of the afflictions, or delusions, the afflictions, the poisonous emotions, negative emotions, either of being involved, either hatred, or aversion or attachment or desire or whatever, right? Now what is behind these afflictions? What are the what is behind these afflictions? What makes these afflictions? What give rise to this affliction? These afflictions, different kinds of mental afflictive states. Then we come to understand. Now, finally, the root cause is the ignorant. When we talk about ignorant, there are two kinds of ignorance. Ignorance. The ignorant at the level of the ignorant of the causation, the law of causation, of the law of causality. So one is that kind of ignorant. Another ignorance, the ignorance to the reality, ultimate reality, the ignorant of the ultimate reality. So in a way, our motivated out of this ignorant at the level of the causation, ignorant of completely ignorant of one's causation, the law of karmic causation. It creates motivated out of this particular ignorance, we create an impelling karma, kind of impelling karma. That impelling karma act as a cause for taking a birth in the lower lane. Whereas on the other hand, we talk about the ignorant at the level of the which is the ignorant of the reality, ultimate reality, or the ultimate reality, or what is called as the reality of the selflessness, right? Selflessness. So motivated out of that ignorance, we create such a karma, impelling karma, which then acts as a cause for taking a higher rebirth. For example, like the human existence, the divine beings, and the form and the beings of the form and formless realm, right? So this is how we enter, uncontrollably into the nature, into the samsara. Once samsara is created, then we are in the nature of the samsara. We are in the nature of the samsara. For example, like we are bounded, in the bondage, right? Then what follows next is what we have discussed right now. Different kinds of the ocean of different types of suffering, one after the another, continuously, without any stoppage. So finally, the root cause is the ignorant, right? And now again, the great master Chandrakirti, he explicitly explained, right, stated, he first we are attached to ourselves, later on, which in turn we are attached to mind, and then in the epistemological, the master Dharmakirti, the great Indian logician and the philosopher, he also says that first we are attached to the self. Why we are attached to the self, right? So this is the important question. Why we are attached to the self? Because the very survival, our very own existence or survival is based on wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So this is the innate feeling that we all sentient beings do have. There is no dispute, there is no question relating to this. Whether we want happiness and not. There is no sophisticated logic and reason to prove as such. Our innate experience tells us this, right? Now, so this is our fundamental right, to be or feel happy and to get rid of or to shun, the misery and the pain and suffering. If that is the case, just sitting there and just
oh, I want happiness, I want happy life, I want happiness, I do not, may I not encounter, or go through any kinds of suffering. It is not enough, Then, because of this desire, the desire to be of, happy of oneself, because of this, now, then, we begin to feel attached to the I, the self, I. So, this self alone cannot, accomplish, cannot help to accomplish, it itself, the self alone itself cannot, cannot or directly involved in achieving happiness, involved in accomplishing the happiness that we desire for, right? So now, because of this aspiration, now we begin to develop a kind of craving or attachment towards mind, faculties, sense faculties, because when we talk about pleasurable experiences, right? Pleasurable experiences, mainly here when we talk about the pleasurable experiences, we are purely talking at the level of the sensorial pleasurable experiences at sensorial level, right? Sensorial level. Now, in order to achieve the pleasurable experiences sensorial level, right? So, because many of the pleasurable experiences, when we talk about, as we know, there are two levels of pleasurable experiences versus non-pleasurable experiences, unpleasurable, right? So, on the one hand, us many of the pleasurable experiences, many of the pleasurable experiences are accomplished at the sensorial level, right? Yet on the other hand, there are many pleasurable experiences which can be achieved at the level of the mind, at the level of the mental state, right? So here again, now the pleasurable experience at the physical level, right, or sensorial level, now need to achieved, right? So the pleasurable experience at the sensory level, if they are to be achieved by oneself, then then there must be the medium through which pleasurable experience are being felt or experienced by the subject. So therefore, now the innate desire to wanting happiness for the self produced or give rise to the attachment or grasping at mind, right? My eye, my ear, my nose, my body, physical, so on and so forth. Now what happens? Because of this, so therefore now we actually involved, because through the pleasurable experiences, for example, how do we understand, how do we experience that external factors, external conditions help us in gaining some pleasurable experiences, right, at sensory level. Now for example, we know, for example, like when we are cold, we put on the heater, right? Or when we are hot, we all put the this one cooler, right, AC. And then when we feel thirsty, I can drink water. When we are hungry, we can eat, right? when we want to listen to some melody music, we can hear. When we want to have a fragrant smell, we can do that. We can smell aroma. And then touching, when it comes to tangible, we just call it touching. When we come to contact with the softness, we feel. In all these things, in all of these things, there's a pleasurable experiences. There are pleasurable experiences in all these things. How do we know, right? Now, again, this becomes so important to understand. When we are hungry, right? When we are in hungry, we enjoy the food, right? Sorry, now I am going far away. Yeah, it's okay. When we enjoy the food, we feel pleasurable experiences, right? At sensory level, right? We eat food, we enjoy it. All these pleasurable experiences occurs only at the at the sensory level, right? Sensory level. Now, when we are not hungry, we try to eat food. Even if we are full, if we try to eat, do we get pleasurable experience? No. Now why? Yeah, right. These things need to be questioned ourselves. These things are really important to understand, so that we really learn to live joyfully. Sometimes we are not satisfied with small joy and happiness, and keep on searching joy after joy, right? So like this. So these the pleasurable experiences that we derived from through this engaging these acts is much superior than other, right? For example, just we take a case of the small example. If we really for example, we have a very soft bed, we have a very soft sofa bed, for a few months we feel the softness of the sofa bed. But then if you use this sofa bed for a very long time, we never feel softness. However, yet on the other hand, after we use some kind of try to sleep on the some rough bed, then after we enjoy the roughness of the bed, after then if we again sleep on a sofa bed, again we feel the softness. This is why it happened. Because therefore the unique system of Prasangika Madhyamika, the Arya Nagarjuna, talks about all the pleasurable experiences and unpleasurable experiences are related, connected. Everything is connected. There is nothing so called absolute. That's why comparing to the pain and uncomfortable feeling
that we derived by sleeping on a rough bed. When we later on sleep on a soft bed, we feel pleasurable experience, because that pleasurable experience is what is dependent on the pain, on the uncomfortable feeling. So therefore, we get this this kind of understanding. For example, usually we are happy, for example, here we are pretty happy, and means a normal equanimity. There is a sense of equanimity. We have the sense of equanimity, for example, here. But now, all of a sudden, if we get some pain, we experience some pain, right? How painful one's how painful is once at the physical level. For example, some people going through some the pain like hepatitis, different kinds of painful experiences, physical pain. At that point, when the person take the medication, depending on the depending on the seriousness of the pain, similarly, the pleasurable experiences that felt at that point is much more subtle, is much more, much more superior. Then when we try to compare with those situations where we are not in the where we are in the equanimity, the state of equanimity. So like this, connect. We cannot say this is absolute. The pleasurable experiences, many of the pleasurable experiences or unpleasurable experiences, if it is the pleasurable experiences at the sensory level, these pleasurable experiences or the pleasurable experiences is when these pleasurable experiences are subsided, it becomes what? When these pleasurable experiences are subsided, it is in the nature of the pleasurable experiences, because these pleasurable experiences that we felt is because of the cessation of the unpleasurable experiences, cessation. Therefore, we really felt the pleasurable experiences at sensorial level, because it's the mere the pacification, it's the suffering that we felt, we experienced, we get out of from that. So therefore, we felt pleasurable, we felt little joy. So
So, anyway, like this. So, then we are attached to this mind, sense faculties. In order to achieve this pleasurable experiences at a sensory level, we then physically, verbally, mentally involved in accomplishing this. In a way, we cannot say our approach or method in achieving this the pleasurable experiences at the sensory level are 100% realistic, can be sometimes unrealistic, right. So, these in a way then as we engage in as we engage physically, verbally, mentally involved in achieving these things, we create then what is called as karma, the physical karma, the verbal karma and the mental karma, which in turn what happened? Which in turn leave the imprint, the propensity, the tendency are stored in our mind. It is not that we physically involved in some positive actions, or physically involved, or physically, verbally, mentally, in whatever ways we involved, but we create what is called as karma. This is not the end. Something is not the end here. We create something that we don't see, which then bring on to the next life after life. So, this is what is called as propensity, or the tendency, the tendency of the positive or the tendency of the negative, which then at the point of death, this for example, when you plant the sprout, we water them, right, we take the care of the the temperature, the soil and all these things, and then the flower blossom. Similarly, is the what is of the 12 links of dependent origination, there are mental states, like becoming, the craving, the attachment, these these mental states. Now it's how to say, activate this propensity, activate, make them ripen, make ripen our propensity, and then when this propensity are ripen, what happens is, now the propensity that we have stored are ready to manifest in a mental state, in a mind, the mind of whatever rebirth you are going to take, we are going to take. So, this is what happens then. So, through that way we enter into the samsaric state or cycle existence. So, this is how the mechanism of grasping works, mechanism of the grasping, the functioning of grasping, or ignorance. Then the two lines, the remaining two lines talks about bringing an end, the bringing an end to this this very what is called as the evil thing, the ignorance. The method, the means, the technique is being taught here as to how we go about making an end to this ignorance.
The understanding to kill this root you said is none other than dependent arising. Right. Now, here if we were to destroy the thing or the cause that make us torture, that make us go through pain and suffering over and over again, the best, the method, the only possible way, to make this possible is understanding the dependent arising, cultivating the wisdom of dependent arising. Right. Here, because for example, we may have although there are different methods being explained, different methods being taught. For example, if one is kind of predominant, once out of many afflictions, if once for example, like the hatred is more predominant, then meditation on love is recommended. Whereas if one is really kind of having a more predominant over the attachment or desire, although there are different kinds of desire, each of these the desire depending on the nature of the desire, there comes the different antidotes, antidotal meditations, right? And then for the those who are having a very strong attachment, then meditation on unpleasant object. The unpleasant object, uncleanness, these things are mentioned. Whereas then those who have various having a more predominant over the discursive thoughts, then meditation on breathing, the breathing meditation is recommended or taught as a method for dispelling different kinds of discursive thoughts, because some people cannot stop thinking, the brain remains so active whole day and night, cannot rest. Then there is another affliction which is called as the sense of arrogance or pride. For this, the Buddha taught meditation on 18 constituents. 18 constituents, that means 6 sources, 6 objects, 6 perceptions, right? Because how do these act as an antidote to reducing or minimizing one's the affliction of the pride or sense of arrogance? It's because the sense of arrogance came from where? Because sense of arrogance purely comes from by using to develop a sense of arrogance, you need some independent target. Normally, when we talk about sense of arrogance or the pride, there's a puff up of one's mind, puffing up one's mind. I'm something superior in many ways, right? So that means you need independent target to develop or to manifest the sense of arrogance. So therefore, if you try to look, there is no independent, there is no basis for cultivating. If you try to analyze, for example, in the case of eye consciousness, you need the eye sense faculties, you need the eye sense faculties, you need the eye sense power, you need the consciousness itself, and then you also need the other factor, like external factors. Through this, all this comes together, one giving rise to another, one keep on giving rise to another. There is nothing so called, there is nothing so solid that we can blame for, right? Because everything is purely dependent, arises because everything arises because of the causes and conditions. Causes and conditions, one cause is leading to another. If you try to trace back, it's endless. It's an endless reality. It's endless. So there is no one's projection, the sense of projection or arrogance or the sense of pride is dismantled as we try to go through this kind of meditation, analytical meditation. Here then you said is none other than dependent arising. So therefore all this now Buddha is very skillful in coming to the conclusion, right? Yes, depending on the predominant of one's afflictions, specific meditations are recommended. However, when I meditate on love, when I meditate on compassion, directed towards a person, one person, right? Directed towards, for example, like person A, I may develop a kind of love or compassion for person A. When I meditate on the the loving compassion of the person A, my hatred, my anger, these afflictions are reduced. There's no question that it will reduce. It should reduce. But then this meditation on loving compassion, reflecting on the compassion for the person A, toward the person A, cannot dispel the jealousy towards other people, a sense of competitiveness, right, or kind of hatred. One cannot do that, right? Similarly, for example, when we try to reduce the sense of arrogance or pride, we can remove, we can lessen by meditating on this as we discussed the dependent, the how the things how the things are brought together with the accumulation, with the gathering of many factors and conditions. This will help for the individual to lessen or minimize one's a sense of arrogance. But then this kind of meditation, the same meditation, cannot dispel kind of like the feeling like hatred, this attachment, and so on and so forth. However, right, then Buddha taught dependent arising. Dependent arising. If we, so now what is the right? What is the ultimate? What is the ultimate medicine? What is the ultimate medicine? What is the ultimate solution that you don't have to, that you don't need to, for each of the afflictions, we don't need to, meditate for each of these, for specific, affliction, you need to meditate on the specific, antidote. On another, affliction, you need another method. Not necessarily going through this kind of process, but rather, directly coming to the ultimate solution. Because by relying on such a path, by relying on the path which can dispel all the afflictions altogether, which can make an end to all the afflictions as the result of the main cause. If we really bring an end to the main cause, the ignorance itself, all the afflictions are stopped, ceased automatically. So therefore, Buddha, therefore, the teaching and the expression of the dependent arising is most appreciated, is most praised. In what ways it is praised? You said is none other than dependent arising. There are many other, as we discussed, there are many, the opposing forces. There are many, kind of, antidotes that can act as a, the kind of the means to reduce, but then temporarily. These methods are just for temporary. If we were to make an end from its root in a non-returnable state, wisdom is the lasting, the most powerful. That is so wonderful that Buddha has taught this for the humanity. Right. Now, the question is, if we were to make an end, if we were to bring an end to this kind of the thing, what is called as ignorance, which we really do not want, that we really want to keep away at a distance level, at a far distance. We are taught to apply antidote. Now, antidote, the wisdom of seeing dependent arising, the wisdom of seeing the reality, the ultimate reality, the wisdom of seeing the reality, ultimate reality. When we talk about the wisdom of seeing the ultimate reality, it needs to, this understanding, this wisdom or insight should have come, because should have come on the basis of something very unique. So that basis is dependent arising, because we are using the dependent arising, we are using the doctrine, we are using the dependent arising as a method, as a technique, as a means for what? As a means to ascertain, to realize, to perceive the ultimate reality, emptiness itself. So therefore, this dependent origination is highly praised. This kind of dependent origination, that in the wonderful system, in the very vast system, in the very comforting system of Arya Nagarjuna, is only found, whereas in other traditions this cannot be seen. Even if we were to, even if this the wonderfulness of this dependent arising, even if these are to be seen in the other kind of Buddhist tradition, the lowest traditions, then but the dependent arising that they are explaining, that they try to prove, is just the cause for and strengthening the grasping, not for cutting the grasping, but strengthening. Right. So, in the Arya Nagarjuna's unique system, comforting system, the mere hearing of which gives a sense of reliefness, the comforting. Right. So we know the dependent arising, the wisdom, understanding and realizing the dependent origin, understanding the emptiness with the help of the dependent origination. This wisdom, unique wisdom, this does exist. This wisdom does exist. This wisdom does exist only if we were to make effort, if we were to make an effort, because that means it won't come easily without making any effort. There is no kind of, when it comes to the cultivation of the realization or the attainments, things will not happen like something coming falling down off from the sky. It's a one's self effort. So, we do know this wisdom. If we were to achieve, if we were to make an attempt, make an effort, joyous effort, there is no question that it would arise sooner or later someday. But then how can we be guaranteed, how can we be so sure that this insight or wisdom will help us to bring an end to all the degenerations, to all the painful experience, to all the things that we do not want to experience in one's life. We definitely know there is an antidote, but this being the antidote, how can we be so sure, how can we guarantee that this antidote will make an end to the things that we do not desire for? Now say, through habituation we prove that finally the afflictions which has no valid ground, valid reason, will come to an end. Again, that is important to understand. It is an important point to give some thought. Yes, once we cultivate it, once this kind of wisdom, the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature of reality with the help of dependent arising, once we cultivate it, what ignorance is, there is no way that ignorance can be manifested simultaneously, right? Because when you direct it, when you develop compassion for the person A, at the same time we cannot develop a hatred for the same person A, because both of them are opposing forces focusing on the same target, yet these two mental states are different or completely completely opposing forces. Similarly, right? For also I use when the light is switched on, the darkness is dispelled. There is no darkness. When the water is so hot, very high temperature water, if you put cold water, it becomes warm water, because the strength is reduced. Similarly, here it works in the same way. When this, on the other hand, we have wisdom, very the strength of the wisdom is so powerful. There is simply no room for the ignorance to arise or manifest at the same time. Now, through habituation,
persistent, habituated. Again, just take a look, just take an example. How can we be sure that through habituation, the strength of the wisdom, the strength of compassion, the strength of the love can be increased to the limitless stage? How can we be so sure? How can we believe? Now we use the opposing negative emotions or those harmful emotions, like anger, hatred, those attachment, the jealousy, the sense of arrogance, all this. What is the function? What is the mechanism of these destructive emotions? What is the main function, mechanism? Bringing a distraction. Bringing a distraction is the fullest potential and the fullest potential nature of the afflictions. In the case of the afflictions, in the beginning it's okay, it's like, you put the oil on the paper, it's slowly, like this, it slowly spread like virus, but then at one point it will blossom into the full strength. It will blossom into the full strength. This is the state when it is blossom into the full strength. A complete destruction happens, because the strength gains the fullest, the strength of whatever afflictions gains is in its fullest, then no force can stop. Some, in this world, we do see, we hear the news, like some people, having committed suicide, falling off from the building and then taking the poison, self-torturing. All this happens. Why? Because the affliction has gained its fullest strength. So because of this, these things occur. Similarly, by using the same logic, in the case of positive emotions like love, the wisdom, the compassion, a sense of forgiveness, a self-discipline, or that sense of the patience, joyous effort, all these things, when through training, they are made to bring the most constructive outcome, constructive result. Most constructive result, right? For example, in the case of the wisdom of the impermanent, the wisdom of the emptiness, when it gains its fullest blossom, when it gains its fullest strength, when it blossoms fully, what's the mechanism? What's the result?
the result would be like in the case of the, in contrast, like the anger and hatred, these not only destroy oneself, destroy other, both sides destroyed. Whereas here, what is destroyed? The wisdom destroyed the very root of ignorance, the very root of all the unpleasant, the very root of all the afflictions, the root of all the degenerations, all the things, undesirable things that we do not wish for. This is desire, this is dispelled from the root. So this is the mechanism. When it gains the fullest strength, it's able to make an end to the suffering, to the afflictions, ignorance, which is our final or ultimate job to do, removing this kind of ignorance, because which has been once eternal and the most most hidden evil, right. So with this, so through training, the strength, through training the wisdom, the strength of the ignorance and the other afflictions are reduced or minimized. Then the same wisdom, the same kind of this wisdom, again what we have experienced, right, what we have experienced, what we have come to connect it with, we need to sustain it. Sustaining makes again another factor. Sustain it, sustaining it, sustaining it. At one point of time, what happened? By the power of sustaining, by the power of such sustaining, then by the power of sustaining, right, and finally, not only the ignorance itself, not only the grasping at the selfhood of the phenomena, and the grasping at the selfhood of the person is eradicated, is removed. Not only the mental, this kind of delusion, themselves, but also the root, the seed is totally destroyed. When the seed is totally destroyed, what we have gained is, this is, say, cessation, pacification, full cessation, full pacification, most satisfying, and non-emergence. We talk about the four characteristics, the four features of the truth of the cessation. So these are the four characteristics and the features. So once we have cultivated this, then we are eternally at peace. We experience the bliss. Now therefore we use the same logic, because when we talk about cessation, which is the complete removal of the ignorance, then the complete removal, this cessation is something eternal, something blissful, is something eternal, is something vast, is a blissful state, the most satisfying. When we apply this reason, therefore I say For example, when we are hungry, when we enjoy the food, we get a kind of pleasurable experiences, pretty good pleasurable experiences, right? Whereas on the other hand, when we don't feel hungry, when we try to eat, there is no pleasurable experiences. What makes the difference? Because one is the pacification of the suffering, the pacification of the suffering of the hunger and thirst. Whereas when we are full, when we try to eat, there is no pacification of suffering. If there is no pacification of suffering, how we are to achieve the pleasurable experiences? Pleasurable experiences, at least when I talk from the sensory level, is measured by the cessation of the suffering, cessation of the pain, cessation of the pain. So therefore, in the Buddhist mind training, there is a Buddhist mind training. There is a training called acceptance of the suffering, rather than rejecting, accepting. Because through accepting suffering, we learn to live joyfully. We learn to accept the things easily. We begin to learn, we begin to enjoy the pleasurable experiences that we have never felt earlier because of our rejection, total rejection. Right. Sometimes we may wonder, a lot of why don't we talk about joy and happiness rather than talking all these things, right? Unless you come to contact with the sorrow, we don't appreciate the sweetness. Once we experience the sweet sorrow, then we realize, oh, this is sweet. As I said, when we try to sleep on the sofa bed the whole year, we don't feel any joy, softness. We don't feel any softness. If you try to sleep on the ground, uneven ground, for a few days and then sleep on the bed, we really appreciate the softness, the comforting, the bed. Otherwise, what happens when we have one sofa bed? After a few months, we say, oh, this is not good. Again, another sofa bed. Again, after a few years of usage, a few months of usage, we again call. This is what happening. Dress, the shoes and everything. Even the electronic devices, everything. Maybe related with some economic or some commercial thing, but mainly going in that way. So happiness is something inside in oneself, rather than outside. Then what really happened? Then now in order to fully awaken this wisdom, the insight, fully awaken, we need other factors. What kind of factors do we need in order to make them fully blossom, fully awakened? we need the altruistic mind. What is this? What is we call as awakening mind, the bodhicitta. This awakening mind, altruistic mind, is what is born from the love, unconditional love, and unconditional, unbiased love and unconditional compassion. So, with the help of this, with the help of this altruistic mind, the wisdom, the understanding, the wisdom realizing emptiness with the help of dependent arising is finally made perfected, can be brought into complete perfection. Through with this, then this wisdom finally destroy what? Finally destroy not only the seed, but also the most subtle dualistic imprints, tendencies. The most subtle imprints are totally eradicated. The moment one eradicated this, one become what is known as the savior, what is called a savior. One become enlightened being, whose compassion is limitless, whose enlightened is limitless, who knows precisely everything as they are. You are in that state. You have gone beyond the limitations. You have crossed all the limits, ordinary, that we normally won't be able to do. The great Aryadeva master Aryadeva also say in his 400th stanza, as we see the dependent arising, there is no way that the ignorance should come. Of the many efforts, of all the many efforts, the efforts of explaining the dependent origination is the supreme. So, this understanding dependent origination, truly understanding the dependent arising in the correct context, in the right context, is so amazing. Because there is nothing more amazing than explaining. Because why, in what ways it remains amazing is because it helps to fulfill our ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is eternal joy and happiness, eternal bliss. This is what understanding and cultivating the dependent horizon would do. Right. Now here, the understanding of dependent arising, we already know, I think I already taught, there are three kinds of understanding the dependent arising. In the lower schools, they talk about the causal dependent arising. Causal dependent arising is explained at the level of the cause and effect.
because everything happens, everything occurs at the level of the cause and effect. There is nothing which comes without any causes, without any reason. That means everything comes because of the interaction, the meeting of the cause and multiplicity of the causes and effect, which makes the things possible. This is the lower, this is what is accepted even in the modern, modern day world or in the modern science. Everything happens, interaction happens. The different kinds of manifestations happens due to the mechanism of cause and effect. Then there is another levels of understanding the dependent arising, which is at the level of the whole and parts. This is what the great Southern Madhyamika, we call there are group of Madhyamika. How to say? Better use the term autonomous Madhyamika. Like the masters of the autonomous Madhyamika are like Baba Viveka, Shandi Rakshita, Kamaleshwara, Master Kamaleshwara, Deva Sharma, and then Hari Bhadra. I don't know in English, Singha Sangha. Yeah, Hari Bhadra, Namrude, Papadrude, and then Abhigara Gupta, Janapada. All these great masters are the followers of the autonomous Madhyamika. Within autonomous, there are different kinds. I don't, go into detail. So these masters now posit the dependent arising in relation to the parts and whole. What they do say is sensory perceptions, many of the mental states, almost all our mental states, things are appeared. Things are appeared, and especially when it comes to the conceptual thought, things are appeared. For example, I take this water bottle as an example. This water bottle is appeared on my sensory eye perception. When this water bottle is appeared, this is appeared from its own part, on the basis of the many parts. I appeared this water bottle on the basis of its own part. This water bottle is a whole. It's a whole. But then when it appears to my sensory perception, it appears merely in dependence. It appears in dependence on its own parts. So this is how I appeared. How this is appeared at sensory perception, and especially at conceptual thought, right? So why do they? How water bottle appears in dependence upon its own parts is because they do believe things are fundable. Therefore, when we talk about this water bottle, they say this water bottle is fundable. This water bottle is fundable from where? Fundable from its own collected parts. So from that perspective,
sensorial perceptions in terms of appearing from its own past, that perception is valid. If however anything when it appears to our perceptions, when it appears to our mind, if they appeared independent of independence upon its own part, then that is the object of negation. That is the object of negation. That is what is to be negated. Right. If things appeared without depending upon its own past, then that would be what is to be negated. This is the object of negation. This kind of thing does not exist, they say. However, now if you look at the Prasangika Madhyamika, consequentialist Madhyamika, like the follower of the Master Shantideva, Buddha Palita, Master Chandrakirti, these great being masters, they do assert, they do posit this appearing of the things, the fundability of the things from its own part does not exist at all, even an inch. This is mere imputation. This is a mere fabricated imputation. Even if the Buddha taught this not as an ultimate reality, but Buddha taught this in order to let them finally to the view of the Prasangika Madhyamika. Buddha taught to temporarily benefit them, depending on their mental disposition. Depending on their mental disposition, Buddha taught what suited to them most. Right. So once they gain certain, conviction, right, in their understanding of reality, then through that slowly, gradually, and eventually, they are brought into the system of the Madhyamika, the consequentialist Madhyamika, or the Prasangika Madhyamika, or brought to the Mahayana. Right? Buddha taught 4 schools. Not because, simply Buddha taught 4 schools because of the mental disposition of, because among his variety of, disciples, there are some, who, they cannot digest the profound, those profound and those vast. So Buddha best taught them what seems to be most bringing benefit to them. Then it is the Prasangika Madhyamika. On the first week class, I will taught how the dependent arising, emptiness is seen as a means of dependent arising. Dependent arising is seen as a means for ascertaining emptiness. Emptiness, the same, but they help each other. They support each other. They are helper. They are helper. One is to be helped and one is to be helper. So one can exchange this between these two. The things are mere designated on the basis. Prasangika Madhyamika taught that on the basis on the the basis and on the imputation, on the basis and on the imputation of what is to be imputed, what kind of name, what kind of concept is to be imputed on that basis, thought, conceptual thought, just labeled, just imputed. This is the most profound dependent arising, the most profound dependent origination, dependent arising. Right. Therefore, Buddha say in his sapling, planting the sapling sutra, Buddha say, who sees dependent arising sees Dharma. Who sees Dharma sees Buddha. So, this is what is all about of the suffering existing in the world, different kinds of suffering. Its root is none other than ignorance, there is no doubt. No. Its root is definitely ignorance. The understanding to kill is this root. Right. First, we need to gain wisdom, gain through hearing, and then that wisdom is transformed into the reflection. Reflection transformed into the experience. So, this is how we proceed. The wisdom one after the another. Right. Most of our wisdom only remain at the intellectual understanding, intellectual level, not be able to bring really into the experience level. So, once we are able to to do that, then external factors won't affect us much more, won't affect. Otherwise, at the just at the hearing intellectual level, things can easily manipulate. We feel up and down because of this, because we haven't gained deeper conviction. Okay, then I think today stop. Any other question? Otherwise, okay, good. Stop.